But tonight, I'm delighted that we have another one of our statewide candidates, because we, regardless of what's going on in Washington, Texas is ground zero for what happens for the rest of this country. And we're changing out all of these statewide offices in the next primary. It is critically important that we have good people run, that they have a campaign, that we support them. And the grassroots is incredibly relevant to getting good people in office, because we're paying attention and we're not just listening to the R or the D. We're looking for the person, the values, what they hold and how strong they are, and what they do to get elected. So I'm delighted tonight that we have David Watts, who is running for Land Commissioner. Just a quick quiz. Who's running for Land Commissioner?
David Watts.
David Watts, yay! You all get a gold star for that, very good. Is there anyone else running?
We don't know.
Somebody named Bush, yeah. George P. Bush is running. He'll be along at some point. But what do we look for here? And you know this because you have been in contact with our group. Dee's briefed you about what we do, but we're looking for people who uphold those values and strength of character and understanding of the values as it plays out in this particular job, and a path to victory. So we want to get to know you. We have good questions, and it's an honor for us to be able to welcome you to our stage. So with that, please welcome David Watts.
Thank you. Let me see where I stand. I'll stand right about here. That'll work okay? Good. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me come and speak to you a little bit this evening. I think we'll talk for 20 or 25 or so minutes, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions. I'll try to answer anything you have. What I usually do, let me tell you just a bit about me, because I don't have the name recognition of my opponent, George P. Bush. My famous last name, Watts, isn't quite as famous as Bush. And I'll tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about the work of the Land Commissioner, and how what I call authentic conservative values matter in that work. And that's important because most of us don't know a lot about the Land Commissioner's work. But what do they do? It must be something with land, right? So I'll talk a little about that and how conservative values really matter in that work. So I am David Watts. I've been married to my wife since 1989. My oldest daughter, Hannah, is in the back with me. Hannah, raise your hand. She's my number one supporter that makes it all possible and keeps everything in line. We have 3 kids. Hannah's the oldest, 18. The middle one is 16 and 14. So we've got the little stair steps, 14, 16, 18. I grew up actually for about 7 years around Houston. My dad was a preacher. He preached in the Deer Park area. And then we moved up to Humble, so we were there for a couple of years. And you know the little saying, hard to be humble when you're from Humble, but we try. Anyway, being a preacher, Dad moved around a bit. So around my freshman year of high school, we moved up to Kentucky. And that's where I kind of finished up high school and college. I majored in political science. I was telling somebody beforehand, you don't really learn anything by majoring in political science. But I ran for office, ran for state rep in 1992. My wife, we didn't have any kids yet, and it seemed like a great thing to do. I did not win, but it was a fabulous process. That's where I really learned what the political process is all about. Pretty soon, kids came along, Hannah came along, and we got focused on kids and raising kids, and we sort of worked behind the scenes. We moved back to Texas in '99. Got here in January '99, been living around Longview, just north of Longview, since '99. And since that time, we've tried to work behind the scenes and support good folks. You know Louis Gohmert, Representative Louis Gohmert up there. You may know State Representative David Simpson, Brian Hughes, some of these folks that I think are really authentic conservatives that we've tried to help up there. So my profession, what I do for a living, is I'm a business and technology consultant. So I help businesses, especially with human resources, where human resources and technology comes together. And most of the time, my routine works like this. I drive Monday morning early to DFW. I fly to my client site, which right now is in St. Louis. Sometimes it's Philadelphia, sometimes New York. Occasionally it's in Europe. I fly back Thursday night and drive home Thursday night. repeat each week. Somebody said, you know, statewide office, there's a lot of travel. I said, that'll be okay. I kind of know the travel routine. Anyway, I realized, well, first of all, we saw Jerry Patterson's running for lieutenant governor, so that creates the vacancy. And then I saw that this fellow Bush put his name in the hat, and all the mainstream fellows scattered. Nobody wanted to mess with Bush. And that seemed just wrong. You can't, in the Republican primary, just let someone walk in on the basis of name. And I realized these companies fly me all around the U.S. and again, sometimes around the world because they believe I can help them become more efficient, to improve their business, find new ways to compete. I thought, that's exactly what the General Land Office needs. It's an executive branch agency with about 600 people. That's exactly what they need. They need to become more efficient, find ways to compete better or to do their jobs with, do more with less. And of course, we always need this authentic conservative approach, and that's where I've always come from, this constitutional sort of approach. So that's what especially got me interested in the race. Now, here's why all this is very relevant, it seems to me. Executive branch agencies, we have a lot of them, of course. Think about them at the federal level, think about them at the state level. Executive branch agencies. If you think especially at the federal level, what happens with those agencies? I propose they're doing at least two things simultaneously. Number one, they are reaching more and more into our lives to control us. Think about the EPA, or the TSA, or any of those three-letter agencies. More and more reach into your life to tell you what to do, whether it's the kind of toilets you can buy, or the kind of light bulbs you can buy, or farmers what they can plant, or when they can, all of this more and more control. They're doing something else simultaneously, and that is they retreat from our ability to influence them. Nobody can go up to D.C. and knock on the door of the EPA and have any influence over them. Have you seen them? Have you been to D.C. lately? It looks like a prison. The agencies, they got barricades out front. You can't have any influence over these agencies anymore. So I would suggest to you, executive branch agencies in Texas are not that bad yet, but they can be. History proves that agencies expand, while they insulate themselves so you can't mess with them. And that's the dirty little secret. That's how they like it. They want more power, but they don't want to hear from you and I. So that's why this is so important. Now, let me tell you, let me talk a bit about what the General Land Office, and the Land Commissioner, he leads the General Land Office. Let me tell you about that work and why why a true conservative approach really matters. The key word is stewardship. If you want to know the work of the Land Commissioner, it's stewardship. It's taking care of things that belong to us. Number one, Texas public land. We have about 13 million acres. It's ours. A lot of that is offshore, from the permanent vegetation line, 10 miles offshore. Texas has their land. Most other states didn't get to keep theirs. We kept ours. And we fought for it in 1950 at the Supreme Court and kept it. All right, but there's a lot of public land in West Texas. We're not talking about parks and so forth, just mostly vacant, sort of wild land, and the job is to make money for education. And that's the neat thing about it. The job is to manage that land, oil and gas leases, however we can make revenue, and it goes straight to the permanent school fund. So that's a great thing. Manage land, make money for schools. I'll come back to each of these in just a second. The second big thing is Texas Veterans Benefits. So the Land Commissioner chairs the Veterans Land Board. And so, the Veterans Land Board takes care of lower cost mortgages for Texas veterans. There's Texas Veterans Nursing Homes and even Texas Veterans Cemeteries. So all that falls under the Land Commissioner. The third is history. So archives and artifacts, preserving those old documents that really define who we are as Texans. And so those are the big three. They also manage the coastlines, some erosion control, and if there's an oil spill, they're sort of the first responder. But the big three, land, veterans, and history. Now let me suggest to you how conservative values look in each of those three areas. So again, think about land, about these 13 million or so acres we have. The goal is to manage Texas land for the purpose of creating revenue for Texas schools for Texas children. And I just summarized it this way. It's Texas land, Texas schools, Texas children. Makes pretty good sense, right? It seems pretty obvious. I'll tell you a quick story of how it opened my eyes. This is not so obvious. I was in Brownsville about 4 weeks ago, one of these kind of forums, way down Brownsville, Texas. Great place, you need to go. It's fabulous to be down there. And the fellow driving us around, he's a Hispanic Texan. His family's been in Texas 100+ years. He said, David, if you want to know the problem down here, it's the fact that we cannot educate U.S. citizen children in our schools because the classroom is so full of children that are not citizens of this country. And we said, tell us more. There was another politician in the car. I'll keep him anonymous for now. But we said, well, what do you mean? He said, David, you can go over to the bridge Monday morning and you will watch the little children walk across the bridge to go to school in the U.S. Monday afternoon after class, you'll watch them walk back. Tuesday morning, the same thing. And both of us in the car, and this other fellow holds elected office, we said, you've got to be kidding us. How does that happen? Every day? He said, every day, little kids back and forth across the board. We said, well, how in the world does that happen? He said, well, there was some sort of Supreme Court decision that said it has to be that way. So as soon as I could get back, I started researching and figuring this out, and he's right. In 1982, there was a Supreme Court case called Plyler v. Doe. Most of us have not heard of it. It started up in Tyler, not far from where I am, the Tyler Independent School District. Back in the 70s, Texas was running out of money for education. So they rightly said, we need to focus education funding on, U.S. citizens, Texas children, U.S. kids. And if you're here illegally, if you're not a citizen, we will not allow you to be in the public schools. And that seemed to make a lot of sense. That's our first priority, is Texas children. But there was a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. You're depriving, now we're talking about non-citizen children of illegal immigrants. We're not talking about children born here to illegal immigrant parents. They're citizens with the current law. But we're talking about non-citizen children of illegal immigrants. And the Supreme Court said, you must provide them with a free K-12 education. Otherwise, you deprive them of their 14th Amendment rights.
They're not citizens.
Well, yeah, they're not citizens. How does that work? But that's what the Supreme Court said. It's called Plyler v. Doe, P-L-Y-L-E-R. Look it up. In fact, there's a national organization called PolitiFactCheck, and they contacted me last week. They wanted to fact check this, and I just got an email before as we parked the car. Actually, we were down at the gas station then, and the lady said it's exactly as you said it was. And so it will be, I think, in tomorrow's Austin American Statesman. They have a little PolitiFactCheck thing. But that's what the Supreme Court did, 82, right here in Texas. And I submit to you, fundamentally changed education across the U.S., because that's law across the entire U.S. If you come across illegally, bring your children, non-citizen children, we must educate them K-12. And that's wrong. That's bad law. It's a horrible decision. I'm not an attorney, but you can read the case. It's pretty plain English. And it's just sort of invented law. There was a presumption that they would stay. And you say, but wait, they're not citizens and they weren't supposed to be here. So anyway, here's my perspective on that. Now, the land commissioner cannot just wave a magic wand, right, and make that go away. But since, if I'm entrusted with this work, my job is to manage Texas land for Texas schools for Texas children. So here's what I would be trying with every ounce of my fiber to do, and that is get our legislature, Texas legislature, to write that law again. Focus education funding on citizens or lawful residents, of course, and get the governor to sign it. I would relentlessly lobby the legislature. Do that. Set that right. Now, of course, when the governor signs that, what's going to happen? We'll be sued, of course. That's what we want. Wanted to go back to the Supreme Court, and this time we win it. Part of what the Supreme Court said, if you can believe this, they said Texas did not present a compelling case that this would affect their educational quality. Well, you have to remember, in '82, you had a Democrat Attorney General. They weren't real interested in defending this anyway. All right? Conservative estimates are that this policy, that we must educate non-citizen children of illegal immigrants, conservatively costs Texas taxpayers $1 billion a year. The high-end estimate is $3.5 billion. I'll go with the low end. That's plenty of money. $1 billion a year. So, again, land commissioner can't make that go away with a magic wand. But I would see my job is to be a lobbyist, essentially, on behalf of the people as it relates to this sort of subject, to get the legislature to do what's right and take that back, and this time we win. And with some of the folks that want to be Attorney General, I think they ought to take that and run with that and show leadership on that as well. So that's one example as it relates to land and education. Here's a second example. It relates to veterans benefits. So we have the Veterans Land Board. I mentioned that's lower cost mortgages, that's nursing homes, that's Texas Veteran Cemeteries. We have another agency in Texas that takes care of veterans benefits, Texas Veterans Commission. Now, why do we need two? Isn't that the way government does things? Why have one agency when you can have two? So again, I can't make that just magically disappear. But I would see it as my job to just relentlessly lobby the legislature, say we don't need two agencies looking after veterans issues. Nobody in business would do it that way. A business person would say, wait, the job is to take care of veterans. We don't need an agency here, an agency here. Bring those together as one. Streamline that, cut some red tape. The VA is a disgrace at the federal level. Let's make sure Texas is much, much better. Here's the other aspect of that. The Texas Land Commissioner has to show up here at places like this once every 4 years, right? And say, please, support me. So if you think they're doing a crummy job with veterans benefits, you've got the neck to choke, right? How about the Texas Veterans Commission? You ever see anybody show up, ask for your vote, that has responsibility for that? Yeah, it's a commission. The governor appoints 5 people to a commission. The 5 people appoint an executive director. Now, you'll never see the executive director because they don't have to stand and ask for your vote. You won't see the 5 commissioners either unless you just happen to know them, because they don't have to ask for your vote. I suggest that's not a conservative approach. A conservative approach, get rid of the 5 commissioners, get rid of the executive director, bring it all under the one throat to choke, so to speak. It has to ask for your vote every 4 years. That's how you make sure it's responsive and responsible to the public. So I think you can make a big improvement there. One final example, again, of how I view that that conservative values affect the work of the land commissioner. History. You say, well, that can't be too, too confrontational or too much controversy there, right? Except, remember, the precious resource, our precious state treasure, the Alamo. Why do we have the Alamo in the first place? Who saved it? Daughters of the Republic of Texas. 105 years ago, basically, they saved it. That's why we have it. That volunteer group of mothers and moms and grandmothers saved it, and for 105 years preserved it. A couple of years ago, there were concerns about accountability. Were they managing some of the monies right? Were they doing some things correctly with that? Attorney General Greg Abbott's report said there were some issues at the top of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. For the moment, grant that that was the case. I'm not sure that it is, but just grant that for just a moment. The legislature took away custodianship of the Alamo from the Daughters of the Republic of Texas based on that finding. Now, here's what happens, it seems to me. When citizens are trying to do good work, and if they should make a mistake, what's the government ready to do? Immediately, right? If that had been a government agency that had made a mistake, it'd take 5 years to have a study in the commission, or there's this double standard. If you got moms, working mothers, grandmothers, there's about 7,000 members trying to do good work. If they made mistakes, we'll just grant it for a second at the top. The government's just ready and eager to crush them. And we took away custodianship of the Alamo from the daughters, and that's a mistake. It's time to give it back. And that's my view of what is a more conservative approach in this sort of regard. Again, I can't, it's under the jurisdiction now of the General Land Office. Obviously, if elected, I'll follow the law exactly. But again, I relentlessly lobby the legislature, say, this needs to be set right. We need to honor our heritage, what the Daughters of the Republic did. We need to give it back to them, give custodianship to them. Then we can have a true partnership between the Daughters of the Republic and the General Land Office. That's fair. I think that's a conservative approach to do it right, to respect history, and yet to oversee, to look after this Texas treasure. Anyway, those are three quick examples. We often say land commissioner. Well, what do they really have to do with anything? They have a lot. Funding for education, a lot of the funding for education. Veterans benefits, history, and that's not even to discuss the coastline just yet. But those are three examples of, I think, how conservative values really make a difference. Maybe I've gone, how'd I do with time? Okay. So is it suitable then, would take a few questions? Would you like, can I answer a few questions? Yes, ma'am.
In Texas, our land commission, our land is one of the most valuable things we have in our government, and in Texas form of government. Traditionally, this land commissioner is one of our top people.
Yes.
Because of just exactly what you referred to. That's a lot of power. And I need to find out a whole lot. I've lived out of state for a while. I don't know how things have changed. Is there someplace we can go to find out more about what the land commission does? Because I didn't know that it had been taken away from the...
Yeah, the custodianship of the Alamo, yeah, taken away. The General Land Office has a pretty good website. They're pretty good. If you look up Texas General Land Office, it may be GLO, that's the common abbreviation, but you'll have to Google it, Texas General Land Office, and you'll find there's a lot of good details about what they're doing and how they do it.
Just look it up on the web.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot of good information there about that. But you're right, it is before there was a governor of Texas, there was a land commission. Did you know that? It is the oldest statewide office there is. So its roots managing Texas. Now, it doesn't manage private land, doesn't manage your land, but it's Texas public land. So again, about those 13 million acres or so. And what these folks way back in the 1800s did that was brilliant was they said, think about it for a second, 1860s roughly, they said education is going to be important to our future. Can you imagine that? First of all, you're a bunch of ranchers in middle of the 1800s, and they have that foresight to say, education is going to be vital for what we want to achieve as a state. And so we're going to set aside the public land that's left. And it's not a huge percentage of total land, but what's left, we're setting it aside. And that money's going to go straight to the permanent school fund. The legislature can't mess with it and divert it. So constitutionally, straight to the permanent school fund. That was pretty brilliant. They knew what they were doing. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, your office, can it designate public land for specific things, like for veterans? If you deal with the veterans, can you designate land specifically for a veterans hospital or something like that?
Probably sort of a two-part answer. I don't think they can just arbitrarily designate existing public land. And they certainly cannot take private land and redesignate it. Now, like the Texas veteran nursing homes, there are about 6 or so around the state. And that land probably was swapped or traded for. We have some public land here and trade with somebody, because you don't want to build a veterans nursing home out in West Texas where nobody lives, in the desert. So there's one in Tyler, and there's several around the state. So I don't think they can just arbitrarily, they can probably swap and buy and sell. Does that help a little bit?
Not really. I'm just curious because we have so many homeless veterans and returning veterans.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, why not designate some land, build some housing for these guys and for these girls coming back?
Yeah. I know that at present, And of course, what they do has to be authorized by the legislature. There were a certain number of nursing homes authorized. I think it's 7 or 8. And they've built maybe 6 of those. And so when they eventually finish out, and of course they get funding, some of it does come from the feds, which concerns me because, the more you get entrenched with the feds, it always comes with strings attached. But it has to be authorized and so forth. But at least they're a great agency that's trying to watch for veterans' issues a bit. Let me check back here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the school fund, what schools does it report? Primary, secondary, and advanced? Does it do anything with community colleges? How does it work?
The permanent school fund, so the PSF is K through 12, and it's distributed based on attendance, the number of children attending. Some of that money, a minority of the money flows into the permanent university fund, which I believe the bulk of it goes to A&M, if I remember correctly. A little bit to Texas. Sorry. But most of it K through 12, and then a little bit to the permanent university fund, which I believe of that, most of it, I think, is A&M. Yeah, it was the land college. It was, again, had its roots in there. Yes.
We have a lot of concern about elected officials who break leagues into office instead of just making.
Right.
I wonder if you could give us a your average, you have 5% of people go on and on, but something that shows that you fought for something like this, because it's important.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So, we have this problem. People talk a good game, they go to Austin, they go to DC, and then they change, right? That's the question. Is there something I can share? I might give an example of, where hopefully I would not be falling into that same kind of trap. Maybe a two-part answer. One is, I'm 46, I've had a great career, and I like to tell people I don't need this. I've had a great career. I want to do this. I want to do one thing. Some folks say, hey, are you going to use land commissioner as a little bit of a launching pad, kind of like we think George P. Bush wants to do? Because that's usually, it's kind of a launching pad. And I've said, no. I got no interest. I want to do land commissioner work, period. I don't want a career. I don't need a career. I've had a great career. I'd be happy to do the work of the general land commissioner 4 years and go home. Or if the people's want 8, yeah, but I got no secret plan. Ooh, I can do this, and then I can go be lieutenant governor, and then, none of that interest. So I think part A of the answer is I sort of don't care, and so I don't feel a need to please anybody. I'll tell you what I think. You might like it, you might hate it. That's probably part A. Part B is that in addition to my work in the secular world, I, like my father, worked as a preacher for about 6. I only preached about 6 years full time. So in that role, there's a lot of opportunity for folks kind of pushing you to go this way doctrinally, go that way. And I've got my convictions about doctrine, and you certainly have yours. And of course, this is not a sermon, this is a political arena. But in that arena, I know exactly what I'm convicted of, and I never moved. And I just don't move when I'm convicted. And that was the case religiously. It's the case in business. Of course, in business, you can compromise on some things, but not on principles. And as it relates to principles, there's just no need to move. So I don't know if that helps any, but maybe one of the other examples I can share, when we were kind of in the kid-raising mode, you remember Rick Perry did this Gardasil vaccine mandate? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Was that 7, 8 years ago? And so my wife and I, from the time the kids were little, we felt strongly that parents should be the ones to make a decision about vaccination. It shouldn't be a sort of socialized health system saying, do this, do this. Parents have to be the ones to decide. And when Perry bypassed the legislature and mandated that, my wife and I fought that as hard as we could. We started a blog. We almost turned into reporters for about 6 or 8 weeks, and we'd call the legislature, okay, how are you going to vote? What are you going to do? We'd write them up, write little articles and so forth. That blog has long since died. But I think we learned there, we just pursue what we believe, and people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. It's okay. And it's okay by me. I guess I don't feel the need to achieve anything. or go anywhere. Which, I told somebody recently, I'm in a unique position, I can tell you exactly what I think. And I don't really care whether you like it or not. And I think that helps if politicians would do that. You know, so, yes, sir.
Well, one of your best qualifications is you're not a lawyer.
Well, that's right, I think so.
But here, I'm so sick of
I'm not a lawyer, that's right.
Hey, but let me tell you, you might want to check that 1982 opinion. I
Yes.
remember that a bit.
Yes.
And I think it's solid, because I think, and if someone will look up the 14th Amendment,
Yes.
I should have brought, I usually carry my Constitution, but it does say, I think it's based on the equal protection.
Yes.
It says no person
Yes.
shall be deprived of equal
Right.
protection law. Other provisions have citizens,
Right.
citizen in there, but what you don't, but if you get into this campaign and are gonna get into attacking those little kids that are coming over the bridge, running for land commissioner, why do you bring that up?
Well, it's a fair question, because as land commissioner, my job is to manage Texas land, make money for Texas education. So I have a vested interest. You know, if I'm generating X amount of revenue that goes to the permanent school fund, and they're draining it out to educate non-citizen children, I've got an interest, and I've got a say. That's my view of it.
Okay.
Now, you're absolutely right in the sense that you know what folks say, right? You have it out for these little kids. My answer is, if I'm asking to serve as Texas Land Commissioner, my first duty is to Texas children. It seems right. And I'm very sympathetic to, because these children didn't ask for this, right? I mean, they're born in Mexico. They're not all Mexico, but it's Central America and other countries. They're born elsewhere. Their parents bring them here. They're not the guilty ones. But while I'm extremely sympathetic of that, I'm very sympathetic of the kids that are in the U.S. citizens, the Texas kids, that we cannot educate properly. Like the fellow said down in Brownsville, that's our problem. We cannot teach the children in the classroom because it's full of children from other countries that are not even citizens here. So I'm very sympathetic to it, but my first duty is to Texas.
I want to just
Yes, sir.
mention
Oh,
one
yes, sir.
other
Yes,
thing,
sir.
because I may be the only one in the room, including you, that's ever worked at the General Land Office. I was in there, I've got qualifications that would beat you. I was in there before you were even born. Under one of your predecessors.
You got a hat, throw it in the ring.
Yeah, I may run.
The filing fee is $3,750, so jump in.
I might be able to afford the $50.
And I want to clarify, I'm not in the General Land Office now. I'm just in the private sector. I want to lead that office.
Okay,
I'm not
well,
there now.
I want to ask you
Oh, yes, sir.
something that I experienced.
Yes.
When Jerry Sadler came into office, he was elected. Did you ever heard his name?
Do you mean Jerry Patterson or
Jerry Sadler.
Okay, Jerry Sadler, okay.
All right. He's a very famous guy around there, and you could probably win this election by throwing his name out and mine too.
Yes.
So look, here's the thing. Here's the thing about Jerry Sadler. When he came into office, that thing was a mess. With that Baskin Giles, I think there was corruption. There was other corruption later on in the man's office. But won't get into that. But Jerry Sadler got so those employees up there are not under civil service. When he came out, I think it was January 1st of 1961. So when we all came, he fired everybody in the whole damn office and brought his own people in, and I was one of them as an attorney there. So I want to know how you think, is the land office operating okay now? Will you go ahead and just fire everybody like Jerry Sadler did? And hire your own people. You can get them from here.
I would think, and I like to say, I'm not an attorney, and I don't play on TV. So I don't know some of the answers to this. I would think they are protected as state employees. You can't just go firing people.
But they weren't then.
They weren't then,
The law
exactly.
has
I think
changed.
today they would be. And besides that, I wouldn't want to do that. While we sometimes poke fun at bureaucrats, for good reason, they are our fellow citizens and fellow neighbors and so forth. So my view is, like most agencies, it's probably got some waste and inefficiency to clear out. But the right way to do it is to approach it through the right channels. Attrition is a great way to try to get, streamline things down. But honestly, I'm not there. I can't tell you exactly what the condition is on the inside. So let me come here and then I'll come back there, man. Yes, sir.
Question, what on percentage of the education on the whole, what is the land money do they get?
I think the money flowed to the permanent school fund annually, and it can only be the interest, the royalties, you can't touch the premium. I think it's going to be in the order of 10 or 15% of the total. Most of it is property taxes. You're paying. So it's the minority for sure.
Okay, now just piggyback on what you just said. Do you see any problems that you can bring to the kitchen, like you said? Is there skeletons in the closet that needs to be cleaned out, or you just have to go in there and see what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't know of anything particular except what I mentioned. I don't like, and these are not unique to the land office, I don't like the way the funding is being diverted. I don't like the dual agencies for veterans, and I don't like the fact that they now have custodianship of the Alamo. But those are not GLO problems per se. Those were done elsewhere. From what I can tell, and you can tell some things just by looking at a website, how open are they, do they publish reports and budgets and all that, and I'm pretty impressed with the degree of openness what you can learn there on the website. I suspect, again, there's a lot of inefficiency, but I just don't know, and I won't pretend.
Well, that seems to answer the first question. Who gave up? Who was targeted to take it away from the ladies or Alamo?
Well, as I understand it, so when there was when folks became aware there were problems of accountability, Greg Abbott investigated his team, and it's about a 30-page report. And I believe the deal that was made was, if the legislature will take custodianship away and give it to the GLO, we won't prosecute. And that's what happened, as I understand it. So that's my sense of it. I missed somebody back here. Yes, ma'am?
Mine was sort of in relation to what he was saying about the percentage for the schools.
Yes.
Because the property taxes, quite a bit of that goes. And I was curious as well regarding like the vouchers. Based on my view of everybody in here, my kids go to private schools, and I would imagine most of these people in here don't have kids in the school system. So I was wondering what your position on that is, and I didn't really even know how much of that money, the school money, is coming from the land.
Yeah, I think it's a minority, like 10 or 15%. Most is property taxes. Now, if you ask me about property taxes, I think the property tax system is horrific, and we ought to get rid of the property tax system altogether, because you folks are just paying rent. You pay up for the property, and you're paying rent forever. And it's just awful. And I fought in Upshur County, I fought the appraisal district where we live, Upshur County. Every year the past 5 or 6 years, the games they play, I've made a list of all the games they play. Imagine getting rid of all of that nonsense. And whether it's a little additional sales tax or whatever the answer is, there's got to be a much, much easier way. I don't have a clean answer on vouchers. So we homeschool the kids. We've always homeschooled the kids. So we're paying property taxes in the school system. We don't use like some of you all are. On the other hand, we all have a vested interest in great schools. Even if we're private school or homeschool or retired, everybody has a vested interest. Better schools attract, employers and so forth. But there's got to be a better way to fund it all. The property tax system is just terrible. So it's a fiasco. Oh yeah, one or two more. Yes, yes, sir.
Is this office running business? When storms come across the state of Texas and people's property is taken away, is this the department that comes in and does that?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, and I'll explain a little more about that. So, so the storm comes in Texas, the state owns, essentially we own, from the permanent vegetation line out 10 miles. The permanent vegetation line moves with the storms, so the erosion may eat in 10 or 15 more feet. The problem that's come up lately is then, let's say that's your house that was, the permanent vegetation line backwards. Now the permanent vegetation line 15 feet into your property. And there's been a lot of trouble with that because the state has said that's now ours, or at least that first 15 feet is ours. One thing that the legislature did that I think helps is they've given the General Land Office 3 years to see where that permanent vegetation line regrows. So that helps, because it takes a little while. And I was asked this question on a radio program a while back, and I said this: it seems to me patently unfair. So that storm takes away 15 feet of your land. Surely we can find a way to make this work. There is public ownership of the beach, but yet there's private. There's got to be a way to balance that. And I said, why not just, whether it be some lease or some easement, 99-year, 100-year lease or easement, or there's got to be a way to respect the fact that some erosion took away some private land and still give access. Don't make people move. But it's a bit of authority.
So don't you think that they should have the opportunity to get their property back? If that happens, and it seems like,
Oh, yeah.
and aren't you losing a tax base because you take the property away and you're not making any money off of that?
Yeah, I don't know whether they wanted to take the whole parcel or just the 15-foot encroachment. But there's got to be a way to keep the private owner there, make it work out. I mean, national park, I love national parks. When I go to Rocky Mountain National Park sometimes. When they formed that, people owned some of that land. What they do? They made it work out. They had kind of a perpetual lease or access or whatever. We can do that. Seems to me there's a way. Yes, sir.
In Florida, they got places, several counties get together and they have a sand dredge. And the sand dredge is a great, they almost like a ship, and it pumps sand back up on the beach as it erodes away.
Right,
And
rebuild
this
it.
one, we might have one dredge that does 25 or 30 miles of shoreline. And if the beach erodes away, we just throw it back up there. Why can't we do that here?
I would think we could. I like the fact that the beaches, I've been to California a fair amount, and you can't access some of those beaches. They're just all bought up by the celebrities, right? So I like the fact in Texas that the public has access, but there's got to be a way to protect the private ownership when that erosion occurs, whether it's rebuild the sand or somehow, or give an easement, something that makes sense to common people, it seems to be. Yeah. One more, or is that, maybe one more?
That's something that takes a tremendous amount of research, because when you go back in one area, you wrote somebody else is spread it down, and it's not an easy answer. It needs to be looked at what they're doing in other states. I know people value their property line, never should be built in the first place. It's a Texas.
Yeah, there's two sides to that coin. Is we're always sensitive to private ownership, as we would expect the government to be for all of our private property ownership.
And I know we're
yet
still
there's
with
private.
some of that,
Yeah.
but
And yet there's also the reality that if I build right up against where I know the public boundary is, and I know storms come in occasionally, I
think
did
we
take
need
a
to
little
look at the
risk.
laws.
There's a little bit,
Yeah, what's there is not there, but in the future.
Right, right.
And I would
But it's a
charge
thorny
you.
one. Yeah, absolutely. And that is a part of the general land office work. And of course, their job is to enforce the law and make sure the law is carried out, so we may have to work with the legislature too, to get common sense laws. I might have run out of... Did I miss? Is there any one last one I missed? I didn't want to... Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be around. So, thank you all a lot. I hope it helps a little bit. And if I can say one last thing, that as you mentioned, grassroots. Mr. Bush has raised $3.3 million as of the last filing report. That name gets you a lot of money. We're a grassroots candidate. $25 at a time. So, if you're compelled, we can certainly use the help. Thank you.